Welcome back to Scary Animal Attacks. In this week's episode, we travel to the desert hills of Orange County, California, near Whiting Wilderness Park. The landscape is dry, desert, scrub brush, and rolling rocky hills, the perfect cover for a stealthy, silent, stalking predator. The hills extend into the urban area above Santa Monica. Cars honk and the city bustles, but that doesn't mean Mother Nature stops doing what she does. This is a perfect mountain lion habitat, and they are thriving here. Mark Reynolds is 35 years old and an avid mountain biker. He spends his spare time racing up and down the trails of Whiting Wilderness Park with his friends. Today, he is by himself. No gun, no pepper spray. Just the freedom of enjoying his favorite hobby in the great wide open. Much of the trail system winds up and down the hills above the parking area below, and the twists and turns go for immeasurable miles. If someone ends up injured or lost, it might be a while before any other people are able to help. Mark is about 30 minutes into his ride when he approaches a short climb and starts pedaling his high-performance mountain bike hard to make it to the top. As he strains, he reaches the top of the incline and his feet lurch forward in a spasm of discombobulation. He looks down and his chain is hanging from the front sprocket. As he leans down to take a look at the problem, he grabs onto the two broken ends of his bike chain. The chain snapped in two from the exertion of the climb. Who carries an extra bike chain with them? Not Mark. As he bends over to try to sort out the problem, he has a very quiet observer who has been following him and now sees an opportunity. The distance between the predator and Mark, who has now become the prey, is closed before the man can understand the predicament he's in. At most, Mark sees a blur out of the corner of his eye before being knocked to the ground by the impact of the 110-pound male cougar, moving at 35 miles per hour. When mountain lions attack, they try for two vital areas. They either clamp onto the neck of their prey and break it and cut off the blood flow and airflow, or they grasp their prey with their paws by digging their front claws into flesh and use their back legs to claw vital areas. This lion did the latter. Mark was disemboweled by the mountain lion, while the beast bit at his neck and face with its claws embedded into his shoulders. The hungry and growing lion clamped its jaws into Mark's flesh and strained to drag the man off the trail and into the bush several yards. He consumes a portion of Mark's corpse and lays up for a rest while he's digesting for the afternoon. Mark's mountain bike lays on its side along the trail as a harbinger. Anne Nichols and her mountain biking buddy, Anne Nichols, head up to Whiting Wilderness Park to enjoy one of their favorite trails together. They're tough ladies and ride hard as they climb the rolling trail system. Anne takes the lead on the ride and is just tens of yards ahead of her companion when she rides upon a mountain bike all by itself just off the trail with another biker looking over it. The pair ask the young man if everything is okay, and he points out the abandoned bike. The women continue on down the trail, which transforms into a series of short switchbacks, and Anne extends her lead on Debbie a bit. As Anne rounds a turn, she sees a tan blur out of the corner of her eye as the mountain lion leaps from its ambush spot. The impact knocks Anne from her bike and disorients her from the force and violence. The cougar sinks its huge canines into Anne's neck and starts dragging her into the brush. Anne kicks and screams out of pain and fright, but is helpless against the powerful predator. Debbie rounds the corner and hears Anne's screams. She doesn't understand what exactly is going on, but hurries to her friend's side. Debbie hears Anne screaming, "I'm going to die! I'm going to die!" over and over. She's horrified to see a huge mountain lion gripping her dear friend by the neck. Debbie grabs onto Anne's feet and yells in response, "I'm not going to let you die," and starts to pull against the lion. This bizarre tug-of-war goes back and forth for a few minutes, with Debbie losing more ground than winning. She's impressed by the power of the giant cat. Nils Magnusson, the young man who was previously looking at the lone bike on the trail, hears Anne's cries for help and comes pedaling. He throws Anne's bike toward the cougar in a panicked attempt to scare the predator. Debbie screams to Nils to throw rocks, and he immediately bombards the mountain lion. Pelting the cougar with rocks does the trick, and he departs the attack scene as mysteriously as he appeared. Nils and Debbie began trying to get Anne back up the hill to the trail. They see Anne's cheek is torn from her face and hanging down. She's been choked unconscious by the lion biting her neck and is limp as she's carried. Nils calls paramedics and they arrive in under 20 minutes. As the paramedics work on saving Anne's life, Orange County Sheriff's helicopter hovers around the area. The backwash from the copter was causing dust and debris to blow around the rescue scene, so the paramedics motioned them away. Little did they know, the lion was hiding a very short distance away, watching the rescue, and was not leaving even after the helicopter approached it closely, trying to run it off. That is when the occupants of the helicopter saw Mark's body in the brush. Anne was carried up the hill to the helicopter and flown to Mission Hospital for life-saving surgery. Her injuries included having her left cheek nearly completely torn off her face. She had more than 20 perforations in her neck around her voice box. The back of her neck had a large laceration as the lion tried to break her neck by biting her there. Surgeons reattached the nerves and muscles that control her face and insert 200 stitches to hold her face together. The mountain lion that attacked Mark and Anne was normal body weight, young, and did not have rabies. When authorities performed a necropsy on the lion, it was found to have consumed human tissues including skin, liver, and lung tissue, all from Mark. Experts say that there are between 4,000 and 6,000 mountain lions in California and over 6 mountain lions in the Whiting Ranch Park area alone. Mark Reynolds was the first mountain lion fatality recorded in Orange County. Biologists claim that mountain lion attacks are rare and that being in a group and standing erect are behaviors that may help avoid attack. Since 1890, California records indicate that there have been 21 mountain lion attacks on humans, but trend up as 19 of them have occurred since 1986. Welcome back to Scary Animal Attacks. Today's episode takes us to the Roxborough State Park, 10 miles south of Littleton, Colorado. This country is largely sagebrush, but does have pockets of timber here and there. Laying on the foothills of the east front of the Rocky Mountains, eastward of the park is high plains, and westward is big mountains. The state's largest city, Denver, is just 25 miles to the north and can be viewed as you climb the hills above the park. The park consists of not much more than a series of trails with good views and sometimes some solitude. The animals of the area include deer, elk, black bear, antelope, and mountain lion. Andy Peterson, aged 24 years old, had relocated to Littleton, Colorado in 1998 to get a new start in his life. He'd bumped around and searched for reliable employment and had a hard time finding it. Changing locations was frequently difficult, so Andy spent a lot of time hiking trails for stress relief. It didn't cost him anything and cleared his mind when he hiked. His favorite local park to hike was the Roxborough State Park. Andy had sought a decent job and finally found one as a park ranger, which suited him fine as he loved being outside. He would take a weekly hike in the park to break up the monotony and reground himself. Andy would typically wait for a time when there was no one else there, but today he passed 4 older women on the way down as he was headed up the trail. He was not particularly engaging to the women as he passed, focusing on his ascent to the top and spending his time relaxing. As he reached the top, he found his favorite sitting rock and began enjoying the view. After decompressing for a while, Andy began the descent back to his vehicle. As he rounded a bend in the trail, he glanced down the trail, and beneath a big ponderosa pine tree, he saw a clump of brownish fur and heard cracking and crunching. He could see that it was a mountain lion, and that it had killed a deer right next to the trail and was eating it. The big cat glanced up the trail in Andy's direction, but immediately went back to chewing on the carcass. Just then Andy really recognized how close in proximity the two of them were, and that he had no weapons to defend himself. He had no firearm, nor repellent spray. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the only thing he might be able to use as a weapon, his multi-tool. Andy quickly began unfolding all the tools from it that he could. He extended all the blades and saws and screwdrivers and finally got to the last one. It took a little pressure, but it loudly clicked into place. As soon as the click of that tool sliding into place hit the ears of the mountain lion, it disappeared. Andy quickly searched the area, but mysteriously the cat appeared less than 35 feet from him standing in the middle of the trail. The big cat's eyes stared directly into Andy's, and he felt somewhat hypnotized by them. The intensity in the cat's stare began to overwhelm him, and he started to back up the trail slowly. The pair slowly inched their way back up the trail until the bend began to obscure their visual contact. At that moment, the mountain lion closed in on Andy quickly. He began to yell and scream at the lion, trying to scare it, but it was coming so fast that he could do nothing. As soon as the lion saw Andy, it began walking slowly toward him. The mountain lion's eyes burned with intensity and focus as it flashed toward Andy. It jumped toward him and he dodged it as he ran backward. Then it jumped again and he dodged it again, continuing up the trail. The big cat continued walking toward Andy until it found a spot to leap at him again. At this point in the trail, Andy didn't have enough room to dodge, and the lion slammed into him and launched both of them 10 feet downhill off the trail. The cougar's back feet dug into Andy's flesh near his midsection, while the cat's front claws were buried into his neck. As the cat dug its claws into Andy's neck, he heard his neck bones cracking and popping from the power. The lion then clamped its jaws onto the top of Andy's head, and it began raking his scalp from his skull, with its lower jaw positioned just above his eyebrow. As Andy struggled against the grasp of the lion, he stared straight into the canines of its lower jaw. The lion's breath smelled like rotten meat and dead animals. Andy knew now that the lion was not trying to run him off or keep him away from its kill. It was trying to kill him and eat him. He fortunately still clung on to the multi-tool in his hand and began trying to reach above his head with it and stab the cougar. He repeatedly slammed the tool into the cat's neck and head, but felt a sharp pain in his finger joint as it closed on his finger and gashed it deeply. The mountain lion released its claws from his neck and quickly slashed him across the face, opening up a 4-inch laceration from the inside of his left eye to his cheek. With just a blur of swipes with its paws, the lion opened up wide gashes on his scalp and face. As Andy felt around the cat's head for something to grab onto, he felt the opening of the cat's eye. He jammed his finger into the cat's eye as hard and as far as he could. The cat loudly let out a long, chirping noise and trotted down the trail a few steps. Andy looked at the cat's eye and saw that it was mushy and gray from his jabbing it with his finger. He quickly regained his feet and picked up a medium-sized rock and threw it into the lion's side. The lion retreated a few more steps away. Andy knew he had only a few moments to escape, so he began to run down the trail. As he hurried down the trail, he flung blood everywhere. As he rounded the trail again, he could see the lion was now back to where he initially saw it, on the deer carcass a few feet from the trail ahead of him. He continued to run past the mountain lion and its meal, and as soon as he passed it, the lion began to follow him down the trail. Andy began to panic as he knew he didn't have the strength to fight off the lion attack again. He indicated that as he glanced around the bushes to locate the cat, he saw the face of Jesus Christ. This energized him to keep going to safety. As he continued down the trail, he eventually approached the same 4 women he passed coming up the trail. They were near the end of the trail and immediately threw their arms around him to drag him the last half-mile to the parking lot at the trailhead. The ladies called 911 for emergency medical help for Andy, and they flew him out to the hospital. Surgeons put in 70 staples and performed plastic surgery to restore the part of Andy's face that was damaged in the lion attack. Andy still enjoys hiking and has become an inspirational speaker and has grown into a devout Christian. The mountain lion escaped any effort to locate it and was apparently missing an eye, which was probably a short-term death sentence for it. Based on the print size and other dimensions taken from the attack evidence, biologists believe the mountain lion to be about 170 pounds at the time of the attack.
Welcome back to Scary Animal Attacks. Today's episode takes us to the beautiful shoreline of Nova Scotia. The island of Cape Breton Highlands National Park features amazing views of the Atlantic Ocean and the unique and breathtaking shoreline with its rolling hills and dazzling flowers and plants. The flora of the area includes pine and fir trees, as well as the usual panel of deciduous trees that adorn New England. The low-growing bushes and flowers cover nearly every square inch of soil. The animals that are commonly seen in the area range from hares and foxes up to lynx and martens, and the larger animals in the area are black bear and moose. Notice that there are no wolves or cougars on the island, which means our predatory species are fewer than in most places in Canada. On a sunny afternoon, on October 27, 2009, Canadian folk singer Taylor Mitchell was soaking in the sun and the fresh ocean breeze while she embraced nature on her walk. She was at the national park as a diversion and a distraction from her touring in the local area. She was renowned for her environmentalism and activism. She had just parked her car and started walking up the Skyline Trail. This trail runs for right around 6 kilometers to 8 kilometers, depending on if you walk the loop or not. In trail guides, it is listed as an easy hike and has boardwalks to guide you on the trail. Visitors are instructed not to approach, disturb, or feed the wildlife at the trailhead. As Taylor walked toward the boardwalk, she passed 2 Americans visiting the park who were just finishing the trail. After the Americans passed Taylor, they noticed 2 coyotes walking behind her in the same direction, roughly 30 yards. They took out their cameras and snapped a few photos to add to their others. These 2 coyotes were absolutely unafraid of the people walking around and seemed to be on a mission. They even seemed to be aggressive towards people, as they would approach quickly and not act submissively at all. Just 6 minutes later, the Americans that had just walked past Taylor said they had heard what sounded like a bunch of howling, or possibly a woman yelling. The two sounds may sound similar after all, especially at a distance. The two coyotes ran past the Americans and were fixated on Taylor. They were not sprinting, but loping, a gait many canines use to pursue their prey. The pair caught up to Taylor where the trail met the access road and began growling at her. Their hackles were raised as they bared their teeth and charged in and out in quick fake attacks in an attempt to get her off balance or make her run. Nearly all predators try to flush their prey and make them run in fear in order to be able to attack the vulnerable rear portion of their body and legs. That is what they did to Taylor as well. As they alternately charged in and out in a confusing series of harassments, Taylor screamed and began losing her personal items as she retreated toward the trailhead and away from her parked vehicle. She took out a small pocket knife and opened the blade to defend herself as she continued to scream for help. As the coyotes dashed in and out and she backed further up the trail, Taylor tried to gash and stab the coyotes. She scrambled and fought with them as they nipped her legs and fingers and continued to back her up the trail. She used her keys to defend herself, but dropped them and ran a short distance to the top of the hill. Taylor was slashing at the coyotes at the top of the hill and screaming for help when she slipped and fell. The coyotes immediately attacked her and bit her on her legs. They bit into her legs and tore her clothing from her body, wounding her severely. She continued to struggle against them as she tried to make her way to the bathroom. Her blood was pouring from her body and spilling onto the ground while the coyotes continued to attack and bite her. Taylor dragged the biting coyotes for about 35 yards to the bathroom and smeared her blood on the entry door. She couldn't get in and continued to fight for life as she dragged the coyotes toward the trees. The coyotes focused their attacks on her legs and her head. She was bleeding severely, especially from the gaping wounds in her thighs. She collapsed and for nearly 30 minutes was at the coyotes' mercy as no one was around her to help her. Finally, 3 young men saw her possessions on the ground and found her torn and bloodied clothing and followed the evidence to her location. There was a coyote standing over her, so the young men tried to run the coyote off. When they approached it, the coyote growled and acted defensively toward Taylor. The young men regrouped and tried again, and again the coyote behaved aggressively toward them. Finally, they attacked one more time, and the predator was driven off a short distance. It wouldn't leave and stood a short distance away growling and acting aggressively toward the group of people. Taylor was alive and speaking. She was a horrible mess, with bleeding bites and tears in her flesh covering the vast majority of her body, but mostly on her legs and head. Mounties arrived at the scene and fired a shotgun near the coyote to drive it off, as they believed the wounds were due to a bear, not coyotes. The rescue party transported Taylor to the hospital in serious condition, and she was downgraded in condition and moved to a more equipped hospital. Despite the best efforts of the medical teams at 2 different hospitals, Taylor bled to death that same day. In an attempt to understand what led to the attack, authorities wondered if Taylor had disturbed a den with young in it, or perhaps she tried to feed the coyotes. During the investigation, authorities wondered if the coyotes had been stalking her for her entire walk toward the trailhead down the access road. The area was known to host around 5 or 6 adult coyotes, and a few of them were larger than normal-sized coyotes. Park rangers returned to the park with firearms and set up observation points to try to prevent any further altercations. A female coyote showed up in the bathroom and was acting aggressively toward one of the park rangers and was immediately shot. Within a kilometer's distance, 3 more coyotes were killed after being snared in leg hold traps. A very large male that weighed 42 pounds was killed about 5 kilometers from the attack site. The carcasses of the coyotes were analyzed by scientists for Taylor's DNA. Her blood and tissues were found on or in 3 of the coyotes. The aggressive female first shot by rangers and the large male were both linked to her directly. The big male was the coyote that was photographed at the access road near the parking lot by the American tourists. The local authorities approved a $20 bounty for all coyotes, but it didn't apply to coyotes in the park. Scientists have reported an increase in aggression and boldness in the area coyote populations, and culling plans are being discussed.